To learn more about startup investing and what your role can be there, joining us now is Varun DB. Hello Varun, welcome to the show.
Hi Alok, thank you.
So Varun is a very special person because he has done CA and CS along with his Bachelor in Commerce, and he has worked in the Big Four, and also more importantly for this particular episode, his knowledge about working in a startup accelerator program where he was investing on behalf of the company where he was working in different startups. So we'll learn more about that. So Varun, first thing we would like to understand is, see, when we say CA or CS, we feel a traditional role. CA just does core finance, or CS just does compliance, or something related to the meetings and stuff like that. But you have worked in startup investing, and this is a very emerging field right now. So first, can you tell us what is this? Like, what is the kind of role?
So, as Alok said, traditionally we think of whenever CA or CS is working, we look for filing, tax, accounts, finance and all those things. But in a startup world, your role will be multidimensional. So, you will have to do multiple things. You are almost, as an investor, you are akin to a startup founder, where you will have to take on all the responsibilities, be it on the business side, on the operation side, on the finance side, on the investing, on the compliance side as well. So your role will be multidimensional. So it's not a very typical role. So you're expected to do things as and when challenges are thrown upon you.
Great. So for everyone who is watching this, we need to understand that there are certain skill sets and certain knowledge which is required to take up this responsibility. So when you were signing up for this role, what was the expectation from your employer that these are the skills we require for somebody who is into startup investing?
So the employer was looking for a person with a varied background, especially who had some kind of investment background experience in terms of dealing with founders, evaluating the investment opportunities, talking to them, kind of negotiating what kind of deals to go through. A bit of structuring background also they were looking, what kind of instruments to be used for investments. There are multiple investments for equity or preference shares, convertible, non-convertible debt instruments. So that structuring kind of background in terms of what needs to be invested, and also where to set up the entity. To be set up in India, or should have a overseas entity with a Indian subsidiary. So that basic structuring and investment experience, plus a bit of working, communicating and negotiating skills with startups, founders, understanding their needs. Because when you have to invest in startups, you have to understand where they are coming from, what stage they are in, what kind of revenue traction they have. So those things are also very much essential, which are not typically coming from the academic learning. It needs a little bit of professional working experience, wherein you develop those skills as you work on the job.
Very good. So what we need to understand is that it is not just your core skills which you learn while writing the exam, but these are skills both on strategy, as you mentioned, structuring, obviously compliance, obviously your core finance and the basics relating to that, and also you were telling me about due diligence.
Correct.
So can you tell us a little bit, like a typical startup, of course we don't want any names, but in general, if a startup comes to you, what was your role in terms of the first time you engaged with them till the time the deal went through? How was that whole process?
So the first time when we would have shortlisted the startup to invest, the initial process would be in terms of term sheets.
Yes.
What kind of deal terms that we are offering to the startup as an investor. The deal terms would involve the kind of investment instruments that we use for the investment. Is it convertible preference shares, or is it pure equity, or is it convertible debt kind of instrument? What kind of stake that we are expecting, what kind of amount we are investing, what kind of valuation we are looking at, and other typical terms in terms of board of directors, in terms of shareholders,
board position,
if required, all those things, and from there on we negotiate the terms, deal terms. And once the startups are comfortable with the deal terms that are being offered on the go, the next process is the diligence process.
So for all purposes, you are the investor. Of course, the employer whom you work with is the organization. Correct. But since you are dealing with every day, you are the investor. Correct. What are the kind of responsibilities which you have towards both your employer and for the startup?
Yes, from the employer side, investor typically would come in with an expectation of return. So what they would clearly look for is the potential of the startup which we are investing, the potential of the idea. From a long-term perspective, whether that idea can generate the kind of return expectation of the investor. And typically these early stage startup to bet on is very risky because they don't have much traction, much revenue to back with, and also ideas might be good, but we might fail in the execution. So even then the risk is higher. So the investor would typically, since they spread out their investment portfolio across multiple companies, they would always carry this risk of some of the startups failing after, even though they're having a potential great idea. So from an investor point of view, it's very important to have an open, broad-minded and a long-term perspective, also having a general business scenario and market scenario and idea about whether this idea is scalable and to what extent, and what is the ingredients or what are the skill sets that are required to scale this startup.
Yeah, in fact, when I met one of the investors, he said, in early stage, we don't go if it is anything less than 100x ROI, at least on paper. Otherwise, they're not comfortable if it's not such a big idea. Like you said, they've invested in many different places, and at least one or two of them have to make 100x, because still on their entire portfolio, it may still be just a 5 or a 6x when you look at it, the overall investment.
Average.
Great. So next thing is for everyone who's watching this, since we want to tell them about the potential careers which is there for people with these skill sets, we'll come a little bit about your personal journey, because you are working in a Big Four, and this was not something which many of them will traditionally take it. Having a background of both company secretary and chartered accountant, you could have continued with the Big Four or go to a traditional company. This is something new and exciting. What made you take up this role?
In my previous stint at Big Four, I was working in mergers and acquisitions, which was in a way dealing with some kind of investment area scenario. Though we were not the investors, but we were in the middle of the
facilitating
the investments, generating different kind of structuring opportunities, helping them in terms of what kind of investment that they need to look at, how many investees they can opt for. So I had that kind of background in this thing, and India was emerging as a startup capital. Correct. And a lot of startups were emerging in the scenario, and this opportunity looked interesting for me, and I thought why not give it a shot, since I had the experience.
Great. So like you thought, why not give it a shot? So everyone who is watching this, most of our students are either doing the company secretary course or about to finish, and of course there are students who are doing the other courses too. So if you have to advise them, like if they were interested in something like you, what are the kind of traits or skills which they have to develop from today?
If you are in the stage of clearing your exams or working towards focusing on this thing, so first important, obviously you need to be thorough with all the subjects that are there in your professional course, because that forms the foundation of any activity which you'll do post your qualification.
True.
So you should be thorough with those foundation skills, and the other skills will come as you start working. The things that you can actually look for for these kind of roles is basically your negotiation skills, your communication skills, which you can develop through your day-to-day activities as well. You don't have to work in a specific company to develop those things. So you're, in terms of vocabulary, what kind of knowledge you use, and this kind of field specifically has a lot of jargons that are being used in startup world. So to brush up in those areas would really help you when you go for interview or work experience. So these are the specific skill sets that you have to focus on, but don't leave your foundations course, because that is what you are valued for, and build extremely well on that. And once you start working, the negotiation communication skills becomes a lot more important, and your strategic thinking, how holistically you can think on a particular aspect or an area, instead of having a very unidimensional look. If you have a multi-dimensional skill set in terms of evaluating any opportunity or any areas of investment from multiple aspects, multiple angles, general business knowledge will help you.
First, people who are watching this, they may feel that, oh, this sounds very difficult, but just to jog back your own memory, when you were a student, did you think that you'll be able to acquire all this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Exactly. So if you're watching this, Varun has gone through a journey just like you, being a student, clearing it, and then gaining experience as he has worked. So next thing is, people are watching, they feel that, is it necessary that I have to be a chartered accountant also for this kind of role, or just being a company secretary is enough? They may have those kind of concerns. What is your message for them?
So being a company secretary, just post qualification might not fetch you this kind of role. But as I told you, I also did not jumped into this role immediately post my CA and CS qualification. So post your company secretary qualification, maybe you can work in certain investment banking field or some mergers and acquisitions field in Big Fours or other things, where you get some exposure around these areas, where you kind of juggle with all the regulatory legal aspects. Plus you also get to understand the startup world, understand their functioning, understand what it takes to kind of be on the investor side or to be on the founder side, all those things. And then as you gain experience, you can switch to these fields. And the investors are not typically only looking for a particular kind of people. As an investor, they'll also be having multiple people. There will be valuers, there'll be people who will be looking after investment aspects. There'll be people who will be doing the business development aspects. They'll be looking out for different startups on their own, which are the potential startups to invest in. So there'll be a lot of marketing reach out that will be there. So different skill set is what they'll be looking for, and company secretary will also be very important in those areas, because company law is a core.
In the entire structuring,
company law is a key thing. So the foundational knowledge and the professional knowledge of company law will also play an important role.
So the simple message is, if you are interested and ready to work hard on the skills, this is a potential career for you. And like Varun said, it can be quite challenging, and also there are multi-dimensional field. That is what he used, that a specific word. So tell me, like, how was your experience? Like, did you feel that you missed something by not going to a Big Four or something else and landing up in this role?
There was a mixed feeling as such. So there was a thing that, okay, I'm leaving a Big Four job, which is much more bigger clients, bigger portfolios, bigger investments, bigger things. You directly deal with board of directors of established companies. And now you're coming to a very low profile role, but it has exciting opportunities ahead. You don't know what kind of opportunities that will throw up. So it's a kind of mixed feeling and mixed opportunity. But I think with the experience and with the confidence that you gain over a period of time, with the professional qualification you have, I think it's worth taking those
actually
chances.
Taking forward, you said that it's a new thing. So can you give us an idea of, like, in the next 10 to 15 years, how big do you think this will grow, and how many more professionals like you will be required? We don't need an exact number, but you can just give us some optics on how
already
this
field is booming, in the sense that a lot of startups are coming up on the scene, and there is a lot of people want to start on their own.
Yes.
They want to quit the job and start on their own. So the potential is already immense, and it will only scale up with the kind of internet opportunities, the kind of mobile penetration that is happening.
Right.
The opportunities are immense, and professionals will be the most in demand. If you can focus on your core skills, they will be really valued like anything, for both from the investor side, also from the startup side. The founders will also be looking for someone who can take care of all the aspects of the business. Founders would be coming from different backgrounds like engineering, MBA, those backgrounds, law and all those things. So they will also be looking for professionals who can kind of be hands-on on all the business side aspects. And a professional like a chartered accountant or a company secretary would definitely be a good fit to kind of.
So the message is simple. The more startups, you need more professionals to take care of these startups, and that is the message Varun is giving. See, we hear a lot about, especially in the mainstream media and news, about the startups and founders. We hardly hear about the professionals who are supporting them. It is something like in the political system, the people who are like IAS, IPS, the civil servants are the backbone. Of course, the politicians, the parties, they keep changing. Similarly, what you can call as civil servants in the government system, we have professionals like CA and CS or lawyers, cost accountants in this. So with startups growing, the field is growing, and Varun has shared all his experiences and also the kind of skills which you require, and most importantly that the future is very bright if you want to get into this, and there are a lot of opportunities over here. Varun, you were telling us about that how these investors and both the founders, they need professionals like CA and CS, and of course we know that the skill sets are different, but as a company secretary, because most of our students are doing the course, how is this role which is suitable for company secretary in terms of what does the founder ask you? For instance, like what is the kind of entity we should go ahead or with? So like that, can you give us some of the questions which they ask, and what is the typical answer which you give them?
So from the investor side, a company secretary can play a key role in terms of what kind of entity to set up for the startup. Is it a proper private limited company to start with, or can we go for a limited liability partnership? And what kind of equity capital they should have to start with, and what kind of the deal terms will have a lot of legal and financial aspects. And company secretary will be a key person both from the investor side, also from the founder side if they are advising them, to kind of enlighten them in terms of what will hold good for their kind of business. And if they are structuring, say, a holding company outside India and a subsidiary here, you have a lot of foreign exchange regulations and compliances that one needs to take care of, RBI in terms of fund transfer and all those compliances. So you need those kind of foundational knowledge to kind of advise them so that they don't face huge backlash and penalties after getting into the business.
Exactly. So in terms of compliance, how important is it for a startup? I mean, can it be a deal breaker? Because I have seen some cases where just because this was early in 2015 like that, where the share certificates were not stamped rightly, and the investor said, this is a deal breaker, I don't want to invest in your company, because foreign investors are very cautious about Indian laws. True. So can you tell us how important compliance is for startups?
Absolutely. As he told, a typical example, the share certificates are usually not stamped. People don't give due care to those very simple basic aspects of documentation of various local legislation that are in play. Yeah. And in startups, you have people funding from various areas, various geographies, various boundaries, and they come in cohort. And when they are looking at investing a company, compliance and legal clearance is the must. The first thing what they look for, because they don't want to get into legal trouble. Because once they get into legal trouble, all their resources, time and energy will go into addressing those things. Right. The court battles, the advocates' fees and all those things. So the first thing that they want to take care of is legally whether the entity is fully in compliance with all the laws and regulations, everything, and there are no back-end things that are going on in terms of litigation. So that is very much on the first priority list. The next thing comes finance in terms of the founder's background, the knowledge and all those things. If any person decides to invest, or if any person wants to start a business, legal compliance is the biggest priority list.
First thing on the list.
First thing on the list.
Yes. So that, in fact, that should encourage everyone here who wants to be a professional, who is going to help startups, founders, and definitely the investors. This whole ecosystem is growing as we speak, and they need professionals. And like Varun also shared just now, that legal and compliance is the first red flag. If they don't get a green signal from the chartered accountant, company secretary, lawyer, and any other professional, investors don't want to go ahead with that investment, even if that startup is great. They'll say, okay, you just make sure that you clear all these issues, then we'll be ready to talk again.
True.
Exactly. So any final things, Varun, you'd like to share for everyone who's aspiring to get into startup, investing, and do a role similar to what you have done?
So again, if you're a student, if you are looking for taking up this professional course and want to qualify this thing, focus on your core skills, be thorough. And today's era, technical knowledge is one of the important key things. So that you need to anyway need to go through. So technical skills in terms of basic PowerPoint or Excel or those things are key for today's thing. Apart from the core professional knowledge is the key thing. So the laws keep updating. There are a lot of notifications that keep coming. So you need to be hands-on on those areas. And once you enter the professional field post your qualification, the opportunities are immense. And even as I told you, the roles are multidimensional in the startup field area. So with the foundational knowledge and skills, and with an open mindset to explore different opportunities, take the risk, be a strategic thinker, multidimensional perspective, having will be an added advantage to the person who is looking to hire you.
Okay, great. So that was Varun DB, who shared his experience of what is the role of a CA or a CS which is into startup investing and working for a investor or a company organization which is investing in different startups. So you too can get into this field if you have the right foundational skills and work towards this. Try to build your network, try to meet people like Varun, and that is how you're going to get into this profession.
And one more thing I think I wish to add, that if you have had the foundation skills and have worked in these fields, and suppose you get an idea to start up in Monday, and this knowledge with the potential business idea will be a deadly combination for you.
Exactly.
And you can be a really good entrepreneur in that sense.
Right. So I think that's a very good tip. So not only just supporting these organizations and playing an important role, you can also start up on your own if at all that happens in the future. That is also a great possibility. Like Varun said, it's a deadly combination. So with that, we'll close this interview. So once again, thanks a lot, Varun, for sparing time. I'm sure everyone who watched this got a good idea, and they can consider even this as one of their potential careers and the specialization in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So for more such episodes, ensure that you subscribe to our channel, and we will share more information on what are the different kinds of new areas which are coming up for professionals in our chartered accountancy or company secretary, and how you can get into that and get into a great career ahead. Thank you and all the best to you.